Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Post. Today we're diving into the heart of marketing with a guest who's truly passionate about uncovering what makes a brand tick and reaching Gen Z on social. He's the social media strategist and content operations lead at HubSpot, where he shapes their social media strategy, creates impactful content, and fosters a vibrant online community. So it's my pleasure to introduce our guest for this episode, Reece Callaway. Reece, are you ready to go behind the post with me?
Let's do it.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have you here, and I can't wait to jump into this episode. But to start off, please could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about HubSpot and what you do in your role?
Yeah, so my name is Reece Callaway. I work at HubSpot on the organic social media team. Like Alina said, I work creative operations and strategy. Occasionally, I'll dip into making some content as well here and there. So see my face across HubSpot's TikTok when the time calls. But yeah, so HubSpot basically is just a CRM platform. We have a sales and marketing platform as well. A couple of other hubs involved. And I've been working at HubSpot for a little over 2 years now.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the show. And today, as we know, we're diving into the topic of Gen Z on social media. And for many brands, especially today, this is a big priority, but it also sometimes comes with a few hurdles. But before we get started and get into the strategy side of things, let's just set the stage. In your view, what is Gen Z? Who is Gen Z as a generation, especially in terms of how they interact with brands online?
I think in general, Gen Z is more casual and informal than some of the other generations. Like a lot of times when we see Gen Z, acting on social or acting on public, a lot of times it's with the sense of casualness, a sense of informality, in a really good way. I think also with Gen Z, we are really tapped in to pop culture a lot more than some of the other generations. We're really the first generation that grew up with social media and phones with us 24/7, like on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, all the time. And so I think when it comes to interacting with brands, we've been interacting with brands our whole lives. And so I think now we've gotten to the point where Gen Z really is looking for authentic interactions and authentic brands on socials. They're not looking for, a super put together ad to come across their TikTok page. Like we're looking for authenticity. We're looking for realness. We're looking for a sense of relatability with these brands. Um, so yeah, that's what I would say.
Absolutely. And as a generation, we want to be entertained. And you put it right. We grew up with social media, so we've always had it. So we like to see brands show up authentically, like you're saying, and that's why everyone says Gen Z is so socially savvy. So given this context that we're both describing, why did HubSpot make it a priority to connect with Gen Z on social media? Like, what's the opportunity you're seeing with this generation?
Yeah, so Gen Z, I think, is starting to trickle into these upper management positions, as the top end of Gen Z hits, leadership positions and becomes the upmarket decision makers that HubSpot is really um, looking at in terms of the purchasing process. These are the types of people that are going to be making decisions that are going to be deciding what platforms their teams are using or are going to be pitching platforms to senior leadership and being like, hey, this is the platform that I think our team really needs, or this is the platform that I would recommend for our team. And so it's really important for us to be able to make an impact on this generation as soon as possible. If we can get into the minds of Gen Z before they're even in these leadership positions, we have a much better chance of making that sale down the road because we've been with these decision makers for a lot longer. The Harvard Business Review put out a study recently that said 90% of people that make uh, purchases, B2B purchases, have a day one list before they're even in the consideration phase of buying a decision. And so if we can get into the hearts and minds of these decision makers, before even their day one, that gives us a much better opportunity throughout the buying process.
Definitely, that makes a lot of sense. So now that we understand why HubSpot is focusing on Gen Z, let's talk about how you're actually reaching them. What kind of content are you creating to attract and engage Gen Z on social?
Yeah, so we're really focused on, like I mentioned earlier, Gen Z is extremely tapped into pop culture, and a lot of pop culture comes from Gen Z at this point in time. And so
Yeah.
at HubSpot, all of our Gen Z focused content is really geared in a pop culture way. Like we want to make sure we're talking the same way Gen Z is talking. We're talking about the same things Gen Z is talking, and we're talking about it on the same platform. So you'll see a lot of our TikToks um, tying office culture and office humor into like a trending moment or into like a trending format, trending language that's happening. Like with Wicked, we've put out some text only stuff on LinkedIn for Wicked. That did really well. It resonated really well with our audience. Um, so yeah, I think it's just making sure that the content that we're putting out ties back to the Gen Z pop culture and ties back to what Gen Z is looking for. So it can take the form of many different ways. It could be a text only on LinkedIn, it could be a TikTok, it could be an Instagram reel. There's really not one format. Gen Z kind of is all over the place with social media. So
Yeah.
gotta tie it in anywhere you can.
Yeah, that's nice to hear that you don't have to stick, and for our audience to learn, you don't have to stick with a certain platform that we're from. If you see something trending on TikTok and you want to bring it into text only on LinkedIn, then do it. And I've seen it worked really well for you in the past. So staying on top of trends obviously is very then essential to reach Gen Z. So how do you identify trends that will resonate with them, and what's your process for deciding, okay, we're going to jump on this trend, or like, okay, maybe we're going to take a seat back on this one and not jump on it? How do you decide?
Yeah, so it really starts with having a social media team that is already tapped into pop culture and tapped into, has a pulse on what Gen Z is looking at and is watching come across their feeds. We try to follow some of the same influencers, the same brands, the same, media groups that Gen Z is following, and then we can kind of get a sense of where these trends are coming from, and we can pick up on the trends really early that way, because that way we're not seeing them come across from just other brands who are, already a week or two late.
Yeah.
We're following from the source of these trends. So that's kind of how we identify the trends is, we just try and be tapped into Gen Z culture, Gen Z influencers, Gen Z, just content creators across social media. But then when it comes to picking the ones that we actually want to jump on in and participate in, it starts with having a discussion of how can we tie this back to something related to HubSpot. So whether that's related to like office humor, whether that's related to like a day in the life of a sales rep, a day in the life of a marketer, if there's an easy way in for that trend to have a office type of spin, or like, maybe it's filling out your CRM, it can be a pain sometimes. And so maybe there's a trend that hits on some sort of pain point, and then we can tie that back to filling in your CRM. Like trying to bridge those gaps between, okay, what is this trend talking about? And is there something related to HubSpot's product, related to, just being a sales rep, to being a marketer that we can tie that trend back into. And then that will relate to, well, obviously most of HubSpot's audiences are, sales reps, customer support specialists, marketers. So we have to make sure that we can tie it back to something that they would also relate to, and that would make sense to come from HubSpot. Um, yeah.
Nice. That definitely makes a lot of sense. If it's not meeting your personas and who you're marketing towards, then maybe it's better off sometimes. I think it's good to be like, okay, this isn't for us. We'll jump on the next one that comes up,
Exactly.
as long as it's
Yeah, and
relevant to the brand.
definitely don't be afraid to not jump on a brand. Or on a trend. It's definitely, I think, I don't want to say a safer bet to not jump on a trend, but don't force your way into a trend. Because it has to feel natural. It has to feel organic. It has to feel like the trend.
Yeah.
So if you try and force some sort of branding messaging into a trend and then it comes out kind of clunky and then it doesn't resonate, then your metrics are going to take a hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes back down to being authentic, which I think sometimes can be a bit confusing. Like, how do you be authentic? How to be authentic? It's just that as you're describing it, making sure that it meets your audience, meets your brand, and there's no force that comes with it. So with the trending content that you're making, how do you balance that with your broader strategy at HubSpot? So in other words, how do you mix Gen Z focused content with other types of content on your channels that you also need to post out?
Yeah, so this can take the form of a couple of different ways. So we make sure that we are tagging all of our content in a way that at the end of each month or at the end of each year, we can take a look back and be like, okay, well, how much content did we post that was strictly pop culture focused, or like a trending piece of content that's geared more towards Gen Z? And then how much content did we post that's more product related or maybe geared towards the senior leadership of market decision makers that are currently in those leadership positions? And so what we do is we try to come up with a percentage of what we want that to look like. And so when we're scheduling out our content and when I'm looking at our editorial calendar for the month, I make sure to tag all of that content in advance. That way we have like a look forward as well onto what type of content that we have. And then that way we can kind of plan out that month and be like, oh, okay, like if there's a trend, we have the space to hop on this trend and to still maintain a good balance. Or if it's the opposite, maybe we cut back some of the Gen Z content and focus a little bit more on the product focused on content that's maybe geared towards millennials and Gen X type of audience rather than the Gen Z type of audience. So it really just comes down to what your team feels is a good balance and what your team thinks, what percentage of your audience is Gen Z and what percentage of your content then should then be geared towards that audience as well.
Absolutely. I think this is where it comes down to that for each company, it's going to work differently at each place. And this is clearly working really well for you in the way you balance it. And I think it's just sort of trial and error until you get there and you realize, okay, this is how much we need to do. We need to mix it in with product content or other audiences as well. So it's interesting to hear from you how you do it at HubSpot. Another thing that I think would be interesting to ask is, so for a lot of social media teams at B2B brands, getting executive buy-in to make this kind of content really can be a challenge. I've spoken to many people in the industry that have said this. So what advice would you give to marketers trying to get their leadership on board with this approach?
I would say to start small, if you're a brand, especially in B2B, if you're a brand that's geared or content is geared more towards, the Gen X, the millennial, maybe the boomer generation, that sort of content is going to look way different than Gen Z content. And so making that switch is going to be a pretty different tone of voice across your social channels. So I think my advice would just be to start small, maybe just put out a few text onlys, don't hop on the Charlie XCX Brat summer stuff if you've been only posting stuff geared towards older generations than and not Gen Z, because that won't resonate. And then I would also say to just take a look at your audience, and if there is a significant portion of your audience that is Gen Z, that is a significant portion that you're missing out on if you're not making content geared towards that group of people. So you need to frame it in a way that it's not that you're switching the tone of voice, it's just that you're also then reaching a new audience that is already following you. And Gen Z is going to be, increasingly moving up the totem pole as far as leadership goes. And so if you're a B2B brand focused on those senior leadership positions, you can make the case that in the next 5 to 10 years, Gen Z is going to be in those senior leadership positions. So like I mentioned earlier, the sooner you can get in the hearts and minds of Gen Z, the sooner you can get into the consideration phase of the buying process with those senior leadership.
Absolutely. And I think if you get the like green light to go ahead and try it a few times and you can see results from it, that's also something that you can take back
Exactly.
and can really help you with getting them on board. But you're absolutely right. Gen Z are in these decision-making positions. So it's definitely somewhere that brands should look to market to. So I definitely lead with that as well. This question I'm really interested to ask you. I wonder what you have to say for it, but what are some of the common mistakes you're seeing brands making when they're marketing to Gen Z? What should they be doing differently?
I think one of the biggest things that I see brands doing, and this is becoming less and less of a common mistake that I'm seeing, but one of the ones that I'm still seeing come across my page a lot is that brands will have these trends, they'll find these trends, they'll find these moments, and they will try and shove a product clunkily into this trend, and it will come out just like a jumbled mess of sales terms and call to actions, and it's overly branded elements in the design and overly branded elements in the script of the trend. And then it'll come out and it won't resonate. And then the brand will be like, well, what the heck? We jumped on this trend. We tried to insert a product into it, and now this post is flopping. We're never hopping on a trend again. And it's not that the trend didn't work, or it's not that, your audience isn't suited for that trend. It usually just comes down to the fact that you tried to take the organicness and take the relatability out of this trend and shove something in it that, in my mind, doesn't really belong in those types of pieces of content. There are certain pieces of content that can be geared towards trends, and there's certain pieces of content that need to be geared towards product. But trying to merge the two sometimes and overly branding the trend and overly, productifying that trend will
Yeah.
end up just making the post flop. And then that's probably the biggest mistake I've seen.
It definitely makes sense. And as you said at the beginning, we don't want to see overly branded content. So that's taking the Gen Z concept and taking it the other way. So it definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, moving quickly to your social media strategy in general at HubSpot, which platforms are you currently active on, and how does your strategy differ from one platform to another?
Yeah, so we're on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, and obviously LinkedIn. And so the way we kind of approach these channels is we try and think about who is on these channels as well. So like our LinkedIn channel kind of has a really healthy mix of the older generations and the younger generation. So a lot of our followers is a good mix. So we try to have a healthier mix balance between product focused stuff, maybe like company updates, partner posts, as well as some of the Gen Z trending stuff will make its way into LinkedIn. But we're a little more picky with the way we operate on LinkedIn, just due to the nature of the platform. It's more of like a company platform. The culture is not the same on LinkedIn as it is on Twitter. Twitter is a lot more unhinged than LinkedIn, just across the board. So, um, and then for like Twitter, TikTok, Threads, we try and have a little bit more of a Gen Z tone. You'll see that it come across a lot on our threads. A lot of it does have, a lot of the more relatability stuff and less of the product focused stuff. So it's a lot more of the office humor, office culture, tying stuff into a day in the life of a marketer, day in the life of a sales rep, um, hitting on those pain points and joys of being in those types of roles. And then Instagram, it's kind of like TikTok. We have a healthy mix of both. We'll do a lot of product related stuff on there. We'll also do some Gen Z stuff on there as well. That one's kind of 50-50. It just kind of depends on the trend, depends on the type of content. But across the board, we try and stay away from like overly branded elements or, you know, just content that we know isn't going to resonate with our audience.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So thank you for breaking it down platform per platform because it's nice to see how different companies split the kind of content that they're putting out. But beyond just the content itself, what else do marketers need to know about engaging Gen Z? Are there any other factors that matter when you're building these relationships online that isn't just what we're posting out?
I think it comes down to, a lot of these brands in the past have made, claims of like, oh, we're 100% sustainable, we're 100% green energy, or, certain claims about their products. And Gen Z is definitely a type of generation that will go and fact check you. So like if you make a claim, if you go and say something, if you use some sort of marketing twist on a piece of product or like a claim that you guys are making, Gen Z is going to go fact check it and they will go do their research on whether or not that is true or not. So I think, like we've kind of been saying this whole episode, authenticity, you have to lead with that.
Hmm.
Um, Gen Z is going to fact check you. Gen Z is going to know whether or not you're stretching the truth, whether or not you're hiding something. So it just becoming being an authentic brand and just being a good intentioned brand from the jump, I think is going to be the best way to hit
Yeah.
Gen Z and to make those sales.
Absolutely. And being transparent with them because you said you're not going to get away with it. So you should just be honest. And it's also, I think another thing that I would add is Gen Z love it when the brand communicates with them. They want to know someone's behind the brand. So
Yes.
if people are commenting on your post, respond to them, engage with them, start conversations with people, show up in the comments of where you know that your audience is engaged, even if it's not in your current audience already. That's how you can reach more people. So definitely, I think being very honest, transparent, and authentic about what you're doing as a brand, and also just engaging with them online. They love to see that.
Yeah, they want the brand to feel like another person on social media. They don't want it to feel like a brand.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So we're coming up to the end of the episode, but I really can't wrap up without asking you. I know that you have predictions for social media in 2025. What do you think this year is going to look like?
I think that one of the biggest things that's going to happen, I think a new platform is going to emerge in
Okay.
2025. I don't think it'll be Blue Sky. Blue Sky is
Yeah.
catching they're gaining a lot of followers right now, but my prediction is that something new is going to come into 2025 and it's going to take Gen Z, Gen Alpha, it's going to take everything by storm and it's just going to be
Okay.
a flood of people going towards it, just like we saw with TikTok. That's my
Okay.
prediction.
Nice. We're going to catch up at the end of the year and we're going to find out if this happened. And if it happens throughout the year, I'm sure you're going to get a ton of messages.
Absolutely.
So my last question for you, I asked this to all my guests, and I'm really excited to hear what you're going to say. What is the best piece of social media advice you've ever been given in your career?
I think the best piece of advice is this is specifically for organic social. I would say it's just not that deep. Social media, is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be entertaining. It's supposed to be exciting. Like you're supposed to make a post that your followers are going to enjoy seeing and want to interact with when it comes across their screen. So, picking the perfect shade of orange that's, are you gonna have it 2 degrees lower? Are you gonna have it 2 degrees warmer? Are you gonna have the font? Is it gonna be Lex and Deca or is it gonna be Arial? Is it gonna be Times New Roman? Those little things will have diminishing returns on organic social, especially. The biggest thing that you need to focus on is just, are you delivering value? Whether that value is
Wow.
product information, company information, whether it's relatability, are you, trying to make somebody laugh on your social? If it hits one of those things and it looks good and there's no typos in the spelling and you're spelling your brand name right, it's probably going to do well. So
That's really nice. I love that. Not to overthink it, just show up on social, relate to your
exactly.
audience, and not worry about those little things because you're right, it's not going to make a difference. But I think that's something that marketers we get really nervous of, that it'll be the make or break thing that happened in the post. So thank you so much for joining me. If anyone wants to learn more about marketing to Gen Z, definitely connect with Reece on LinkedIn and definitely go and look at HubSpot social media pages, all of them, because they are crushing it. So it's literally just a place for inspiration and just to see how another brand is doing it well. So thank you so much, Reece, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.